Hey guys, Jexie here. Welcome back to another video. Okay, so this video is going to be a little bit different than what I normally do. As those of you know, normally my channel is all about my experience with recovery from addiction, and we kind of talk about stuff related to that. However, lately I've seen a lot of these influencers talking about like fake kidnapping stories, which has really been kind of upsetting because we did have something serious like that happen over the summer with my son, my niece, and a neighbor. And I was going to share about this a lot earlier, but it didn't seem timing right, and I'll explain that in a bit. So strap in, because this is a story I'm grateful for how it ended, but it was a scary ride. Okay, so timing wise, right? Like, why did I choose now? Did I choose now because influencers are coming out with these fake stories? No. The reason I didn't talk about this when it first happened is because it was so upsetting to the kids involved that it would have been inappropriate. It would have brought back memories. It would have been a real problem. This happened back in the summer. I waited until now. I kind of was reminded by it with all these, I guess Katie Sorensen or I don't know, whatever their names are, talking about like these potential fake kidnapping situations, which is ridiculous. But like the fact is that sometimes scary things do happen, and my family did have a real experience, not one that we thought was real. And so I thought I'd share it here. I did speak to the kids and ask if it's okay that I share about it, because I obviously, they watch my channel, and I don't ever want to share about something that's going to be upsetting to any child, right? Because that's not what the internet's for, in my opinion. They all said that they thought it was worth telling, as the reason things worked out as well as they did happened to be because they did the right things. And had they not known the right things to do, it could have been a completely different turn of events. So they thought it was a good idea for me to share about it because it's important for kids to learn the right things to do when these things happen, for their own safety. And like, as a parent, like kind of would rather just like pretend it never happened. But the reality of it is that like we can't control the world. And sometimes scary things do happen, and pretending they didn't isn't how we fix it, right? As I said, luckily my kids are fine, but it was frightening. All right, so let me back up. First off, let me lean on the screen here. I'm gonna like draw an outline of like what I'm talking about, because I think that having a visual of the location that this happened would be beneficial. I hope you understand that I'm going to leave out specifics such as names of places other than, I'm not going to name the convenience store or name the ice cream shop or name the apartment complex that I'm talking about. I'm going to just say convenience store, ice cream shop, and apartment complex, both for my own safety and for the safety of my children and anything like that. But I am going to put like a diagram here of the outline in case my words aren't descriptive enough. Okay, so as I said, this started back in the summer, and we live in a townhouse development. It's kind of isolated. It's surrounded by two main roads, and we're not really connected to anything. So there's not a lot of places for kids to be able to leave the development to walk to, even once they're much older, right? There's really very few. So one highway outside one development is like a super main busy road. Like adults, it's not safe for adults to cross, right? But the other highway isn't really a highway. It's one lane in each direction. There's a crosswalk. And so the same way, like this is where I grew up. And when I was about my kids' age, I was allowed to walk to the convenience store. The rule is with my kids, when they would want to walk there, is they couldn't walk there alone. They had to walk there together with at least one other person. And they had to go straight there. And then they needed to report back to me the moment that they were back in the neighborhood, before they went off and did any other playing. Needless to say, since this situation, none of the children have walked to this convenience store. So our neighborhood is kind of behind these apartment complexes. And the way it works is, as you'll see where I'll put here, is the convenience store and the ice cream shop are across the highway from where you would be coming from where we lived. The apartment complex is on the same side of the highway that we live in. So when they come up, they actually come up from the apartment complex, and they cross the street at the apartment complex to the convenience store. And you'll see why the locations matter about this as we move into the story. So now that setup is kind of there, so what happened was my son, my niece, who is a little bit older than my son, and a neighborhood little girl, all decided that they were going to walk to the convenience store. Now, they're all between the ages of like 10 and 13, and they were walking into, and let me make this clear. So I'm telling you the story from a mix of perspectives, because originally I only had some sides, because turns out all the kids' stories were about the same, but the girls tend to remember a little bit more details. So some of the stuff I'm entering in are from like different perspectives, but you'll understand why. Boys remember things differently than girls, at least in my experience. So they're going to go walk to the convenience store and get Slurpees. It's the summer. So they cross the highway, and as they're walking through the convenience store parking lot, my niece notices a car kind of driving next to them up into the parking spots. So they're walking to the front door. This person's driving, but they're driving just a little slow, paying a little bit of extra attention to the kids. Weird, right? But this is something my son didn't even notice. I think only my niece did. Maybe the other girl involved did too, but my son didn't even notice the person at this point. So they go into the store, and they notice while they're in the store that this person is still in the car. The person is a man, maybe late 20s. They described him as either being Hispanic or of Indian descent. They weren't quite sure. He had darker skin, but he wasn't African American. So that was kind of the description they were able to give. And so this man is watching them from the car while they're inside the store, which they thought was strange, but, again, didn't think too much of it. So they leave the convenience store and they walk to like the very end of the front of the building where there's a red box, and they're just standing there and they're drinking their Slurpees, and they notice that the guy is still sitting in the car watching them. And so they get like a weird vibe, and I don't know at this point if he had said anything. There's a little discrepancy about whether he spoke to them at this point or not. But either way, they decided, you know what? We're just going to leave this situation. We're going to go back across the street. Now they were stalling because the ice cream store, which is next to the convenience store, wasn't going to open until noon. And they had gotten into the convenience store, I would say about 11:15. So this story takes place over some time. So when they walked, when they were walking into the convenience store, it was about 11:15. So they are now outside. They're standing outside. They see the guy still looking at them, think it's weird. So they decide they're going to cross the street, and they're going to hang out. There's a grassy area in the front of the apartment complex, and they're going to hang out across the street and wait for the ice cream store to open. So they walk across the street, and as soon as they walk across the street, the guy leaves the parking lot of the convenience store and drives to the parking lot of the apartment complex and gets out of his car and starts walking towards the kids. Now, at this point, they're already freaked out because they had noticed him watching them at the convenience store, and now here he is following them to the apartment complex. So he gets out of the car, and according to my son, he's walking with his hand behind his back like this, which my son immediately thinks he's got a weapon. He's got a gun, he's got a knife, he's got a weapon, right? And so he said something to them. I'm not 100% sure what he said at that point. Remember, this is like 6 months later. I'm sure I could read the reports and refresh my memory, but it's not really relevant. So he may have said something to them, but they freaked and they ran. And so they ran like in an opposite direction, and they kind of hid for a little while until he got back in his car, and they watched him drive down the highway southbound. Okay, so this is important. So he leaves the development and he drives southbound on the highway. So they kind of stay hidden for a little bit of time, and then they decide there's like now it's like 5 minutes or so before the ice cream shop's going to open. So this has been now 45 minutes from the first time they had an encounter with this man, and so, they're back in this like grassy area in front of the apartment complex, and they think the guy's gone. Everything's fine. It's been at least 20 minutes since they saw him. So, they feel safe enough. And all of a sudden, the guy comes now from the northbound side, coming south, right? Which means he left them and did a big circle on the other highway around the apartment complex to come back. He didn't like turn around. He did like a big circle. And so they see him, he pulls up, again, they're in this grass area in front of the apartment complex. He pulls up in front and rolls down his window and says, "Hey guys, why don't you come in the car and we can all go hang out?" And at this point, the kids are freaked, right? Because they're told from the time they're little, like, stranger danger, don't ever get in the car with somebody. If someone asks you to get in the car with them that you don't know, like, that's a bad thing, right? So they freaked. My niece tells my son, take a picture of the license plate. So they did. And then they booked it back home. And now at the time, I wasn't home. I was working with the census. I had just gotten a job. It was like the first time with the job that I was like out of the office. So I think I was still in training. I don't even remember. So they come running home, and all three of them run into my house. And my dad's home, and they are telling him what happened. And my dad obviously is like, that's not funny. That means that this man has been stalking them for 45 minutes, and then at the end tries to get them to come in the car. Now, luckily, apparently, the friend who was with them actually started stepping closer to the car to say, why are you following us? What's going on? Whatever. But like my son and my niece were like, what are you doing? We need to book it the other way. So, thank goodness that she wasn't alone, because who knows what decisions would have been made, right? This is why I've always, tell my kids, like, buddying up is a good idea when you have kids, even if they're a little older. So they come home, and, my dad immediately calls the police because, that's scary. So they make a police report. The police come, they interview, they do like an official interview, like a small interview. And then it was either later that day or the next day. It may have been the next day because I was home then. The two detectives actually come, and they sit down with my son, and I'm there with him. And we're talking like a full questioning, right? They ask him to repeat his story. They ask him, what was said. And they do this with, my niece actually went into the police station because she doesn't live in the same town we do. So they brought her into the police station to do questioning, which, the following day, which must have been horrifying, right? Like, imagine being like a tween and having to go into the police department to give a statement. Like, how scary, right? And there was no adults who witnessed this. So it's just the kids. So all three kids give their statements, they talk to the detectives, and we have the picture of the license plate, and we have all but the first digit, whether it be a letter or a number. It was on an angle, obviously, because of how they were parked and where they were, so we're missing the first digit. And so we're trying to, like, Google, right? Obviously, the police are doing their thing, right? But, internet and looking things up. So we're looking things up later Thursday night, trying to see if we can find a website that says like what kind of car or anything, right? Get any information, because it's scary. My son won't leave the house. He's having, he started having nightmares. He slept in my room because he was scared. He was scared. All the kids were, right? And like, it's not an embarrassing thing, right? Like, you imagine like somebody just tried to get you to go into their car. Like, we're talking frightening. And I think that's one of the things that bothers me with these like influencer stories is that even when they talk about it, like I couldn't have talked about this in front of my kids after it ended without having like a visceral fear reaction. And so to see people talk about like, yeah, like joking around kind of thing, like that's how for me it kind of feels like maybe those stories aren't as legit, because I'll tell you, after being around 3 kids who went through something like that, that is not the reaction that kids or adults have when something like this happens. So anyway, so now it's like a couple days later, it's Friday, and my mom had a friend over and she's leaving, and we look out the window and what do we see but the car with the license plate parked right across the street. So now we don't know at this time how long the car's been there, whether it's someone that lives here, whether he found out where my son lived. Like, I mean, ridiculous, right? Like, I can't even explain like the emotions that went through. So my dad immediately calls the police and says the car that tried to lure these kids is across the street. It's across the street, right? Okay, so I'm gonna add, not, this part's not funny, but it adds a little bit of humor to the very tense situation. So the police get a call that a potential child lurer, or whatever, is across the street, right? His car's across the street, and my dad's freaking out. So the police jump in all their cars and floor it the 3 minutes to our house, right? Now, we find out later, the detective had just found out some information, and she had just gone into work. She starts work like later in the day. So she had just gotten into work that day and was going to go around and give us a call and kind of inform us of updates, right? But that hadn't happened yet. So we make the phone call, and all these police come flooring into our house, and the detective hears this over the radio and says, uh-oh. Because what happened is the police heard potential child problem and fly here on top of angry grandpa may do something stupid. Now, my dad wouldn't do that. Obviously, we call the police, right? That's what we do. But they don't know, so they're flying over. So when I tell you there was like 6 to 8 cop cars with like multiple cops in them in our little development, like flying out, like not even joking. So while they come in and talk to us, they get a thing over the radio and they're pretty much telling everybody to stand down. The detectives show up. Now, as it turns out, this person that tried to lure my child and my niece and their friend into his car lived across the street. So the reason the car was there was because they lived there. Now, we had never seen anybody that matched that description living across the street. In the house where the car is, it's an older couple. So it turns out that they had a child who's about, 20s or whatever. And the detective had found this out. She was going to call us, but we saw it first, right? So she told us, like, they had run the background check. I didn't have a history, and they were going to talk to him. And here's where the story kind of takes a turn. So they go to his house, and this was now the following day, maybe 2 days later, because they were gathering other evidence or whatever they do. They get the guy, and we're watching obviously like through the windows, and they get the guy and they bring him into the police station in an unmarked detective car, like not in handcuffs or anything, just for questioning, for a statement. The thing is, he admitted to all of it. He said, like, yeah, I saw them at the convenience store, and yeah, then I went to the apartment complex, and then yeah, I came back around and I said, hey, why don't we hang out? Totally admitted to all of it. The thing is that what was very clear once we had seen the guy, and once they had spoken to the guy, is that maybe he wasn't really, he was a little, a few screws shy of, or whatever the thing is, right? Like a few crayons shy of a box or whatever. He wasn't quite there, and that he may have actually, because he apparently recognized my son, which makes sense, although we had never seen him. He apparently had seen my son and my niece and stuff play outside, and he really didn't understand why he couldn't play with them. Now he has a driver's license, and apparently he had an incident at a bar one time, so he's like not behind enough where he doesn't function like an adult, but there's clearly a miss thing. But so, then we had a conversation with the police. Like, this is a serious, serious thing. Like, so luring of a child is a felony. But based on the information the police had and, the situation with his mental state, a felony probably didn't make sense. But there needed to be some type of punishment. Otherwise, what's to stop him from doing it again? So what they ended up doing is filing harassment charges, which came with a restraining order that says he's not allowed to make contact with my child or my niece or the neighbors. And now it's on record. He was arrested. He, had mug shots. He's got a record, so it's there. So it was a very, very scary situation with a sort of anticlimactic ending, which is really what you want in a situation like this. Yes, you want to see the person punished if they were doing something wrong, but you don't want to see the punishment outweigh the crime either, right? If he's really isn't capable of understanding and he didn't have those bad intentions, then how do you punish him for something, right? So I feel like that it kind of worked out in the best way, and it definitely helped the kids to deal with the fear, understanding that he wasn't trying to hurt them. He just really didn't understand that an adult hanging out with children, even if you think you know them, isn't really appropriate. But thank goodness, it ended that way, right? Because for a while, especially between the time when we realized he lived across the street and understanding that he wasn't quite fully capable of understanding, there was a few days of time there, and the kids were terrified. I mean, imagine thinking that a bad guy lives across the street from you. That's horrifying. And as a parent, I can't fix that. I can't protect them. I mean, I can lock the doors and let them sleep in my room and say it's okay and be there and be awake, right? But I can't take away that fear. Luckily, time helped and it's better. But look, I know this video was long, but I felt like it was important to tell this story because the fact is that the reason that my kids were safe, now, as it turns out, this guy did not have those bad intentions. But if he did, and it was just the one girl who didn't know not to get in a car with somebody, this could have had a very different ending. I mean, luckily, my son and my niece, they know, out, right? Get out. You keep yourself safe. You get out of the situation. You tell an adult, right? You take a picture of the license plate. They made all really good choices, and the police, the way the police spoke to them were you guys made such good choices. You should be so proud of yourselves. You're very smart. They said they were really great with the kids. And, percentage-wise, kids getting, taken from strangers is not really a rampant problem, right? It's statistically, it's almost always someone they know or someone within, but I don't know, would you count a neighbor as someone they know? Does that fall into that statistic? I don't know. I don't know. But look, if anything, it's important to explain to your kids about stranger danger or about not getting in a car with somebody without asking your parents, right? Maybe what we tell them is not don't get in a car with a stranger, is don't get in a car with somebody without asking your parents if it's okay first, even if you know them, right? Even if you recognize them. You'd be surprised how many times I've seen it happen with other kids, get into a car because they recognize the person from walking the dog around the neighborhood or something. That's happened here. And luckily it was fine. The person was just trying to help, but you need, I don't know. And with all these stories, it blows my mind with these influencer stories. And I'm how do you expect your kids to make good choices if you're not making good choices, right? If you think you're being followed, why are you walking out into an empty parking lot? I don't get that. Would you tell your children to do that? If you're afraid, why would you tell this person? Why wouldn't you call the police, right? Because that's what we should be teaching them. I don't know. So that's just something I thought I'd share. As I said, I asked the kids if it was okay. I told them, obviously, I'm going to keep it as non-specific as possible. But yeah, it was frightening, and yeah, it was. I'm just glad it turned out the way it did. So, let me know what you think. I have some other story time kind of stuff that are not necessarily recovery related that I can share about. If you're interested in knowing more about like just things about my life, I can do that. If you're interested in joining my Patreon, links are down below. I have a Twitter, I have an Instagram, all that stuff. It's all according to Jexie. It's pretty easy to find me in places. Yeah, but if you enjoyed this video, leave a like, leave a comment, let me know. Like, have your kids ever been through something like this? Like, I'm telling you, it really shook me. It shook me to the core. And like, and I'm glad I can tell it now after the fact, where it's like, here's what happened, here's the resolution, right? Without being like, this scary thing happened and I made it up, you know? But no, I'm just glad it worked out the way it did. I'm glad that everybody's safe and that, you know, it wasn't really somebody trying to cause my kids harm, but yeah, it's scary. But yeah, all right. I guess I will see you guys Wednesday at trivia. Remember, we do live trivia every week at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you join my Discord, if you want to give an idea for a topic, let me know. Yeah, I guess that's it. It feels weird to just like stop talking after such a heavy topic, but I don't really got a lot else to say. So again, thank you guys for watching my channel. I hope you have a great day, and we'll talk more soon.